beautiful hearing that we have organized today together with Tessares here in that beautiful room 6Q1 of the European Parliament. It's a pleasure to have you here and to talk with us about how to make faster and better internet access in rural areas. Why is it so important for me to talk about that issue? Why have we organized that hearing here? My constituency is the east of Belgium, so named Belgium. And this is a real rural area where, with often very poor or non-existing internet connections, we have already brought forward several demands to our network operator for a concrete action plan in order to get faster internet there. We also conducted a survey within the constituency where 700 people answered me that they don't have enough internet or not internet at all. My core demand is that we as rural areas must not be forgotten as something that we hear quite often here in the Parliament from the other 27 member states. And this is a big problem for many regions in Europe. 21% of households in the UE countries suffer from a low-speed internet connection, less than 30 Mbps in 2017, and 13 is a quite high rate. In most cases, we speak about 2 to 5 Mbps. If we want annual investments, rural regions should always be one of the focus of large telecommunication companies. This is of strategic importance. Why? Because internet will be as important as basic water or electricity supply. For our economic development, we need good internet connection. Our companies cannot afford a disadvantage purely due to their location and internet connection. This is a fact. It's also unacceptable for consumers in rural areas to pay the same prices as the consumers in well-connected areas despite poor or hardly available internet connection. Here, the suppliers must change their regime, otherwise the prices are not justified for customers. This goes with a proposal made in the European Communication Code. I quote, "The internet speed everyone has access to must take into account the speed that the majority of consumers have access to." A simple principle that is not reality within Europe. An interesting traditional solution could be the increased use of 4G mobile signal in order to improve internet speed in remote areas. Therefore, I would like to thank Tessares for their willingness to present their innovative and proven ideas today. I visited Tessares 2 times, and even me, I understood what they are planning to do, or what they planned already to do, what is their product. We are also very pleased to have several renowned expert keynote speakers, and I will present each and everybody now. So for the first speaker is our only lady in that panel. It's Katja Reppel. She is a lawyer of German nationality who worked for 6 years in the Council of Europe before joining the European Commission in 1999. There she held positions in DG Employment, DG Enterprise and Industry, and DG Regional Policy. She also worked for the Innovation Department of the German Federal Ministry of Economy and Technology. Today, Ms. Reppel is a deputy head of the Unit for Smart and Sustainable Growth of the European Commission's Directorate-General for Regional Policy. Her fields of expertise are research, innovation, SME, competitiveness, digital economy, education policy, smart specialization, and synergies between EU funding instruments. A lot of things that you are working in. So, Ms. Reppel, perhaps you could, as an introduction, tell us how is the current status and the challenges in the EU rural areas, what is done within the European Union to improve that?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm always bemused what you find on the internet.
Yeah.
It's correct, by the way. Still, I'm puzzled because I wasn't asked to provide a biography. Well, thank you very much. Now, indeed, access to digital networks is getting, as you said, as important as water and electricity and land and transport connectivity. The European Commission recognized that already a couple of years ago, and we put the bar now a bit higher. You know, the digital single market strategy includes one strand where we actually chart out really a pathway towards 2025, and that's called the gigabit society. Sorry. Which contains not only quite ambitious targets for urban areas in terms of 5G access, for instance, and really ultra-fast internet access, and anyway trying to cover all the key economic drivers in the regions, but it also stresses what you pointed out, that every household, no matter whether in remote areas, mountain areas, in very rural areas, sparsely populated northern areas, and so on, every household should really have the opportunity to have a decent connectivity to high-speed broadband, and that really by 2025. We asked the member states to have a fresh look into their broadband strategies. We also called on them to look into their own financial possibilities and mobilize also private investors, because there is an investment gap. These things, unlike what kids in the street believe this is all for free, what they're running into their mobile phones or into their computers, it's not for free. There is investment necessary in order to have the infrastructure which is there, and this isn't done with just here and there a mast for some 5G transmission. You actually need also the fiber and other technologies in the ground to make things happen, and maybe satellite and so on. So there's quite ambitious objectives which were set out. I'm trying to shrink this slide. Here it is. This geographical disparity issue, or digital divide as we call that, is one of the things which stands out in the statistics which we have. You mentioned some of them. It's not bad by and large, the coverage of fixed internet connections, so next generation access. 80% of European households have that. Fixed broadband in more slow, traditional version is 97% of the households. But there you come already to a problem. Although there is the possibility to connect at these modest speeds, only 25% of the households actually choose not to do so, which may not be a problem now, but in a couple of years when administrative procedures and health issues and so on become more and more digitized, there is a bit of an issue if households just don't access because of, I don't know, skills, money, or connectivity problems. So it's something we need to address. When we come to the ultra-fast broadband accessibility, it's not bad, 58%, but there's still quite a lot to be done. The issue is also with 4G coverage. Yes, we have 98% of coverage, but what I talked about before, the 5G coverage, we're pretty much nowhere in the moment. And when I look into the rural issue, which you were stressing so much, from the nice average of 80% of European households having access to fixed internet, we're down to under 50% having access, not subscription, having just the technical possibility to access NGA networks for households in rural areas. And also the mobile coverage in 4G is quite a bit lower, but although there's quite a good success so far, although I suspect that the remaining 10% are the particularly tricky ones, which require particularly high investments on the ground and are having a particularly low return on these investments. So it will be difficult to mobilize the private investors for that. On the graph below, you can see that in red the average view, and then below in a greenish color you see the rural. So there's a massive gap. Now, cohesion policy, the structural funds where I'm working for in the European Commission, joined in the group of services of the Commission to say, yes, we want to address that on our behalf. There is a strategic element for Regional Development Fund and Rural Development Fund, is that we ask member states and regions to come up with broadband plans. That is one of our ex-ante conditionalities. So this was a bit of between a carrot and a stick in combination to say, please draw up plans, map out where you have needs, and put that onto your political agenda. And then, of course, there is the money which comes behind. It's a bit over 21 billion, which goes into digitalization, of which around 6 billion comes for broadband and connectivity issues. Beyond connectivity, there's of course the issue of e-skills, the European Social Fund. In the Rural Development Fund, there's also the uptake of high-tech solutions in agriculture and so on, which is covered in this. And even in the European Maritime and Fishery Fund, the digitalization of the relevant sectors is on the political agenda. So quite a lot of importance in my policy field. And I'm taking a breath because I couldn't honestly say that everything is rosy and green. Investing in broadband is a challenging business for the public sector. Public sector meaning more than anything, it is taxpayers' money which needs to be invested well, which should be competition-wise fair and open to everyone, which should deliver results which are affordable. You stressed that very much. What good is it to have theoretically the possibility if I can't pay the bill for such kind of subscriptions? You should respect the consumer choices. Consumers can be either, well, kids who want to just surf everywhere, but also enterprises. They want to choose between the different types of offers they have. Not to mention that for politicians it is not easy to find their way in between the different competing companies which are there. And let me stress, it's good to have companies competing in this market. That offers choice for the consumers. And when you talk about the pure technical side as well, there the choice for policymakers and public investment companies public investments is, well, what is actually best technology? It has to be reliable, as I said, also affordable. It has to have good download speeds and ideally also upload speeds. When you come to companies wishing to use that, it is a matter that you have the upload speeds, which you also need. And this is very, very challenging for many administrations on the ground. To spice up the situation, the state aid rules come also into play because they are actually supporting the possibility of consumer choice and also set out for public investments in this field that if there is a public investment and taxpayers' money going into it, it should be a wholesale model. That means that then everybody should be able to use these infrastructures which are put on the ground and not just one company which happened to be the lucky one who gets the state aid. So this is really an issue where many managing authorities of structural funds and public administrations of all sorts are really struggling with to understand between the legal intricacies and the technological intricacies, what actually should they do. So maybe the presentations today will enlighten a little bit and offer another alternative which could be out there. Now, from the Commission side, we issued guidance documents for helping public administrations, but to be quite honest, just having an English language 150-page long brochure doesn't change the world. So we came quickly to the point to say, no, we actually really need to have people on the ground with whom mayors and region developers and so on can talk, who know about the legal intricacies and the technological sides of them, and how to run procurement procedures and so on. And jointly with commissioners for regional development, for agriculture and rural development, and for digital issues, we launched an initiative for a network of broadband competence offices exactly to help the policymakers and project promoters on the ground to have good ideas how to roll out broadband, provide accessibility, to help them with doing that and getting the best out of taxpayers' money which is put on the ground. And by now all the member states have joined in, have designated such competence offices, some actually even at a regional level, if their country foresees to have a strong regional competence in this field. The Commission supports that by offering a networking platform called the BCO Support Facility to allow for mutual learning among the network members. There is also the European Network for Rural Development, which is very active, and the European Investment Advisory Hub, to which people can turn and get more advice. And to top up on that, not in my house in the Commission, but in the Directorate-General for Agriculture, together with them we launched about a year ago a Rural Broadband Action Plan to come up with even more targeted support and advice and guidance documents, and bolstered, by the way, via the broadband competence offices on the ground, to address the rural broadband issues, and also an initiative which came up from our colleagues from the Directorate-General for Agriculture called Smart Villages, so to offer not only smart cities where there are enough investors and there is a juicy market around, but to go to the parts of the European Union where the investors are not queuing up in front of the door in order to roll out and invest into broadband. So that brings me very briefly to my closing up. We're now in the phase of preparing for the next funding programs, including the Regional Development Fund. There is one objective, as you can imagine, which is about connectivity, digital and transport and energy and so on together, where we hope that quite substantial funding will go into. It is packaged together, by the way, for your information, in the same philosophy like the Connecting Europe facility, which brings together also energy, transport, and then a digital component. We followed their logic a bit to make that more compatible, and I wouldn't say interchangeable, but it is somehow more interoperable. And these investments from the Regional Development Fund, which will hopefully follow suit, will then complement also investments from InvestEU and the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much. Ms. Reppel, as you stated quite well, the investments in broadband are quite challenging. The EU invests money in order to invest in broadband. But the situation is that not everywhere, as I described it before, that the broadband is not there everywhere, and that we have to find perhaps a solution in between. And therefore, I'm quite happy to welcome perhaps a solution and those who invented that solution. The solution has the name multi-path TCP. For me as a lawyer, that means nothing, but for everyone who is a little bit working on that field, that means quite a lot. And therefore, I will give the floor to that person that invents the multi-path TCP. Is that correct? Yes.
So the teamwork.
It was a teamwork. Who is a co-founder of the startup, and it's a little bit more than a startup now, Tessares. It's Professor Olivier Bonaventure. I guess it's an Italian name, so Bonaventure. He's professor at the Catholic University of Leuven and co-founder of Tessares. He's professor of computer science at the Department of Computing Science and Engineering. He started as an engineer in computer science with a degree from the University of Liège and wrote his thesis on the subject integration of ATM under TCP/IP. Wonderful. To provide services with minimum guaranteed bandwidth. He is head of the IP networking laboratory where the multipath TCP protocol was co-developed, which led to the foundation of Tessares. Tessares, a spin-off from the UCL in March 2015. And if I correctly read it in the internet, Tessares was founded with money from the European Union. Is that correct?
The multipath TCP was funded with money from the European Commission.
That's correct. So you have the floor. Yes.
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. Let me just go back in time and go back at the origin of the solution that we are describing today. So as you know, the European Commission funds a lot of research from academics and from companies. And in 2007, a team of internet researchers in Europe applied for funding from the European Commission, and we said to the European Commission, trust us, we will design the future internet and we will change the internet. And we got funded, and in January 2008, the Trilogy project started, and the objective was to create the future internet. So it was a team of people with researchers from academic and from companies in Spain, Belgium, Germany, Finland, UK, and we tried to address different problems, and one of them is led to the development of multipath TCP. But let me just try to show you what is multipath TCP in one slide for the non-computer science people. So every time you go on the internet, you are using a set of protocols, and those protocols are the rules that define how you can do the communication. And one of these protocols is called TCP, the Transmission Control Protocol. It's one of the oldest protocols that we use. And it's there to ensure that the data that you exchange with the servers is reliably delivered. So it will retransmit information when there are packet losses and when there are errors, and it adapts to the available bandwidth. And one of the main limitations of TCP was that it was designed in the 1970s, so I was 5 years old when TCP was designed. And at that time, the university who had one computer were very lucky to have one computer. And this computer, the fewer university, they had one connection to the network. And so TCP was designed with the assumption that computers would have one connection to the network. And today, this is not the case anymore. So today, you are used to having computers or laptops or smartphones that have multiple connections to the network. You know that your smartphone has Wi-Fi and 3G or Wi-Fi and 4G, and when you start to exchange and to communicate over the cellular network, sometimes you move inside a building, inside a bâtiment, inside a building, and then you get over Wi-Fi, and when you move over Wi-Fi, what happens is that your connectivity will change, and you will switch from the cellular connection to the Wi-Fi connection. And this should be completely smoothless for the user. But if we look at how the protocols work, basically the protocol will force the application to restart all the exchange and all the communication. TCP, when you have multiple connections, so when you have Wi-Fi and 4G, TCP cannot allow you to use both at the same time. You use either the Wi-Fi or the cellular, and so users switch manually from Wi-Fi to cellular because they want to have better connectivity, or they are in a coffee where you don't have enough Wi-Fi connectivity, and then you switch to cellular. This is annoying for the users. And many users, when I explain to my daughter what I'm doing as a research, she told me, well, this should be easy. I have Wi-Fi and cellular, it should work all the time, and I should be able to use both together. From a technical viewpoint, this is not possible. So this is what we addressed. And we addressed that as a team of academics and companies by doing through standardization. Standardization is the way to make sure that the solutions that we develop, they are not only published in the scientific literature, they also have a wide impact. And so we wrote the first papers in 2008, and then in 2010, and we went to the most important standardization body, which is called the Internet Engineering Task Force. And we told the Internet Engineering Task Force, which is responsible for the TCP protocol, that we had an idea to improve TCP. And they agreed to let us develop a working group to develop this new extension to TCP, which is multipath TCP. And in parallel with that, we developed an open source implementation which allows anyone to use multipath TCP, any academic, but any company. And one of the first smartphones to use multipath TCP was a Nokia smartphone, which was using multipath TCP in 2010, based on our implementation that was developed in Louvain. And so standardization work progressed, and in 2013, the official standard was published in January. And a few months later, we were surprised to see a small company called Apple that had decided to use multipath TCP on all the iPhones. So just by having standardization, you have a research result from a European project, which has wide impact because it's used by one of the major companies throughout the world. And since then, Apple has been using multipath TCP for all the exchange for the serial application. So every time you talk to your iPhone or you talk to your iPad, you are using technology that was developed in Europe. And then, after 2013, we developed other use cases. So in Korea, where 4G is a bit slow because it's only 500 megabits per second, and so users complain, they said, well, we will combine Wi-Fi and 4G to reach 1 gigabits per second. And they did that by using the open source implementation. OVH did the same in France, and Tessares, that was created in early 2015, designed the first hybrid access network, and this hybrid access network, they will combine DSL and 4G. This is something that we did not expect when we started the research, but this is a nice result from academic research. So let's look at what we can do with multipath TCP. So multipath TCP allows you to aggregate bandwidth and provide much more performance than by using a single network interface. So when you have a smartphone, you can use together the Wi-Fi and the cellular to have a fat pipe that allows you to exploit the two networks at the same time simultaneously. And this is true as well if you live in a rural area and you have multiple connections. You have two DSL lines because the speed of the DSL is low. You have 4G as well. With multipath TCP, you can combine them together in a fat pipe which can be used by all your applications. So this gives you the ability to use much faster internet services by combining existing services. So you don't need to roll out new fibers to be able to benefit from the solution. You can already leverage everything which is available. And so this hybrid internet access is an architecture that was standardized again by the Broadband Forum and the Internet Engineering Task Force. And Suresh, Denis and Wim will speak about it later on. So what we do with multipath TCP is that although we have a standard and we have convinced Apple to use it for the serial application, we have not yet convinced Microsoft to use multipath TCP. So if you have a Microsoft laptop or if you have an Android smartphone, usually you don't have multipath TCP, and so you are doing regular TCP. If you use regular TCP and you have a hybrid internet access with DSL and 4G, TCP will use either one or the other. And what we do is that with multipath TCP, and this is the standard from the Broadband Forum, we will convert multipath TCP into multipath TCP so that you can use multipath TCP in the access network and still use TCP to reach the standard internet servers, because the standard internet servers do not support multipath TCP either. So now, let's look at the conclusion. So I'm happy to report that multipath TCP that we discussed today is a result of a lot of academic research within Europe that was funded by the European Commission. So I mentioned Trilogy, but there were other projects like Change and Trilogy 2. So the research goes back in 2008, so it takes 10 years to go from research to real deployment and to having impact in Europe. And one of the key elements of having impact was the standardization in 2013. And now in 2018, we see that hybrid internet access will allow a much wider range of users in Europe to benefit from faster internet services. And so there are other solutions where you can address different segments. So we discussed there is a segment with a residential and the SME segment. You can also address other use cases like SMEs have a better redundancy and better reliability with multipath TCP. and I guess the others will mention. To give you back the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Bonaventure. Quelle belle aventure d'avoir inventé multipart TCP. Moi, j'ai appris ce que c'est. Je crois que je comprends. Et je suis content d'avoir un Apple pour une fois parce que apparemment, donc j'utilise une technologie que vous avez inventée.
Oui, sans savoir.
Sans savoir. And I give immediately the floor to, and I hope that I will pronounce it correctly, Suresh.
Perfect.
Leroy. The name is correct also.
Perfect.
Who is IMIA Regional Product Line Manager for Residential Services within Nokia's IP and Optical Networks Division. If you have to write that on your card, you need a big card. Yes. He joined Alcatel in '98 as mobile research engineer. He has now almost 20 years of experience in telecommunications. He joined Nokia IP division in 2017. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science and a master's degree in software engineering at Brussels University. Monsieur Leroy is based in Antwerp, Belgium. Here you are.
Thank you very much. So what I want to do with this presentation is explain you a bit how MPTCP works. So let's start by looking what we have, the situation we have today. So today, either you're connected over a DSL line or some other access technology, which is represented by the bottom part, or if there is no wireline access, you are connected to 3G, 4G access. So if you look at the situation today, let's just take the fixed wireless access, the DSL access today. So you have a modem at the home that connects to your copper line that reaches to your home, and then traffic goes to what we call a BNG, where the user is authenticated, charged, and gets an IP address. And from there, we go to the internet. So that's been there for a long time, but based on the length of the copper wire and so forth, sometimes it doesn't provide enough bandwidth. The other alternative is to use LTE for fixed broadband access, and in that case, actually you just replace, let's say, your copper wire by a wireless medium, and you connect to one of the existing base stations, and similar to a BNG, it's called different, a packet gateway, where you get an IP address, and from there you can go to the internet. But as Olivier already said, you have to make a choice, is using one or the other, because TCP is not designed to use both at the same time. So what do we need to do to enable MPTCP? So to start with, on the home side, you need a residential gateway that supports both access technology. So it has to have DSL connectivity, and it has to have at the same time LTE connectivity. And on top of that, it needs to have a function which we call MPTCP proxy. So although Apple supports MPTCP, there is also a world outside Apple, and there are a lot of devices that don't have MPTCP. So one of the key principles here is that those devices, you can't upgrade all of them, so we need to provide the facility to use both access technologies, but in a way that is transparent both for the PCs, laptops, tablets you have at home, as well as any server you want to contact on the internet. So one key essential part is the CPE, where we'll have the MPTCP proxy. And then together with MPTCP, if you have two access links, you will typically choose your wireline connection as being the primary access, so the technology or the access technology over which you initiate all your sessions. So what do we need on the other side? If you have a proxy, you do MPTCP, you need to terminate that somewhere else. You want to be transparent to the internet, so you need to terminate that somewhere in your own network. So therefore, we introduce another box, which is called the hybrid access gateway. And this has the equivalent of the CPE side, so it also has an MPTCP proxy. So what happens then when you want to set up an MPTCP session? You use this TCP protocol, which was invented, I was not even born, in 1970. So you set up the TCP session, it reaches your gateway at home, so your modem at home. That modem will see its TCP session and will convert that into its new protocol, multipart TCP, and will forward that over your DSL line to the network, it hits the BNG, and then it will follow the default path or the default route to the internet, and it will reach the hybrid access gateway. There, based on the standards, we recognize this is MPTCP, and we can terminate MPTCP and translate it again to this 1970 protocol. It has evolved since 1970, by the way. So you see two important parts. So in the middle, we have this new technology, MPTCP, that combines both access links, but towards the home and towards the internet, it's still regular TCP. Now, this is still using one access technology, so depending on some policies on the CP, you can decide, okay, my application, video for instance, needs more bandwidth, I don't have enough with DSL, so I'll set up, I'll use also the capacity available on 4G. So on the CP, I'll start splitting traffic over both access technologies, and then the traffic that is sent over the LTE pipe will then also be redirected to the hybrid access gateway and terminated. And then both streams arrive on a hybrid access gateway and can be combined towards the single larger pipe towards the internet. So that's very basic, the principle of MPTCP. It's probably very small for you to read, but one of the big benefits of MPTCP, it's an overlay solution. So we are not introducing a new access technology. We are using the assets which are there in the field, your existing DSL line, your existing 4G, and by introducing two boxes basically in the network, we can provide an optimized broadband experience. So that means also at the point in time where, for instance, your DSL line, copper line is replaced by fiber, actually you could say, okay, in that case, I just send traffic no longer through the hybrid access gateway, but through the internet, and I can use those resources of the hybrid access gateway for other users. It's specified both for IPv4 and IPv6. And it's standard-based, which is an important fact. So Olivier mentioned the RFCs and the ITF standardization body. So the big benefit of that, and I guess the testing we have done with Tessares is a good example. So both R&D teams start developing something independently of each other. We bring the two together, and it works spotless. So that's one of the big advantages, that it's fully standardized. This is just another way to show MPTCP. So what we are doing is we are not changing anything to the underlying network. So the DSL network still works the way how it does today. We don't change anything to the end-user authentication, billing, or support infrastructure. We are actually working on the level of IP flows. So that means that the example is typically DSL and LTE, but actually you could use hybrid access or MPTCP for any technology. The only thing you need to do on the CPE side, of course, you need to support the two technologies you want to combine. This is the most technical slide, so my excuses for this. This is showing a bit, okay, I talked about an MPTC proxy, so here you see the two proxies. On one side, the left side, the one in the home, on the right side, the one in the network. So what we do is we take a regular TCP in, and then we set up two independent TCP flows to the hybrid access gateway in the network. And one of the good things about MPTCP, it's based on TCP. Underlying is still basically the same protocol that has been there for ages and has been optimized for performance. Which means that if you use two access links, both links will still utilize to the maximum the resources. It's a dynamic environment where we can adapt to based on packet loss, congestion, and so forth. It also, because we have two subflows, it also provides resilience. So let's assume your DSL line is temporarily disrupted, then you can still send all the traffic over the remaining access links, 4G in this case. And you can still have, as an end user, service continuity. The other good thing is it doesn't require any tunneling. So it's basically TCP packets with just some extension header. So there is no additional overhead, no additional tunneling that is needed here. Now, if you look at the deployment models, there are basically two deployment models that can be used. So if you look at the left side, this is the one I showed in the first slide, where we put a gateway on path of the end user's fixed line and intercepts all packets, terminates MPTCP and sends it to the internet. That's one way to do it. Another way is to put the hybrid access gateway, for instance, in a more centralized location rather than being on the default path. And in the hybrid access gateway on the home side will then redirect traffic directly to that gateway. What is shown here in green, but again, my apologies for the small size, is as Olivier said, there are actually two main protocols on the internet. It's TCP and UDP. MPTCP by definition only does TCP. So green represents the UDP path. So in the left model, it follows the same path as your TCP traffic. On the right side, UDP follows your fixed line access path, and then MPTCP goes to this hybrid access gateway. Now, we discussed about using two access technologies and get a better user experience for that. So how does it work? And one of the key factors of MPTCP, or key benefits from MPTCP, is that we do this in a per packet base. So if you send a video file over the internet, actually what happens on the internet is chopped in pieces, packets 1,500 bytes, and then it's sent today over a single link to your home. What we can do here with MPTCP is actually look at every packet independently and decide whether or not it fits better in the wireline connection or in the wireless connection. And one of the big benefits is that if you have a big video file and you have a 3 megabit DSL and your video is, let's say, 10 megabit, you can still use to the full potential this 3 megabit and then send the excess traffic that you need for the video over LTE. So it's always optimizing the use of, let's say, your wireline infrastructure, which is the least costly. And you can't see it, but there is some specs in the blue part, the black part. So this is just saying, because we do per packet distribution, we support what we call fat pipes. So meaning MPTCP will be able to send video streams which are larger than what a single access technology can support. And you are flexible in the way how you steer traffic. So this is something typically not standardized, but kind of vendor differentiated. And you can then steer traffic based on criteria like best available path, if you want, for instance, a low latency connection, or optimize in terms of cost. So it's flexible in steering traffic according to local policies. Here is the text. Anyway, too small. Just as a closing remark, so MPTCP does TCP. So one of the questions we get regularly, so what happens with the rest of the traffic? What do you do with UDP? So what we have seen on the internet is that actually the fragment of UDP traffic in total is quite low compared to TCP. So the bulk of your traffic, 80 or more percent, is still TCP, and with MPTCP we can utilize then LTE and wireline. And because UDP is typically 8–10% depending on region or applications you use, it still fits in your DSL over most of the DSL connections. And then this is all a lot of slides, so I wanted to end with a promotion video that BTEE made to promote these hybrid access. So what you will see in this video is actually a typical use case. So you have a DSL user at home, they want to watch a soccer match in this case, and they want to watch it preferably in 4K. So they start with just using DSL. It's not large enough, bandwidth is not large enough for 4K. So what you typically see are either artifacts or your video stalls and continues, and stalls and continues. So not a smooth end user experience. So what you will see here, it's actually shot also at a live location with a live network, is what happens when we enable MPTCP, and suddenly you get access to more bandwidth, 4K video streaming becomes smooth. And the last use case is what happens if one of the access links fails. And you will see that you can still continue watching.
Yes, thank you very much. I must admit that I did not understand everything, but mostly I understood, and the last sequence was very helpful for
The good thing is
decisions.
you don't need to understand, it's all transparent to you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Il y a 2 ans, quand on a été face au problème de connectivité d'Internet dans ma région, j'ai contacté Proximus et Proximus m'a dit, écoute, on va investir dans la fibre optique et entre-temps, on a trouvé une solution intermédiaire. Cette solution intermédiaire, vous pouvez aller la voir et regarder sur place dans une petite ou moyenne entreprise près de Louvain-la-Neuve qui s'appelle Tessares. Appelez M. Périquet, il va vous accueillir et vous expliquer de quelle façon fonctionne cette solution hybride qui travaille avec ce multipath TCP, tout afin de trouver ou de faire plus vite Internet et afin de donner à ceux qui ont une connectivité de 4G à la maison mais qui n'ont pas un accès Internet assez rapide, de trouver une amélioration de leur situation. On était voir donc Tessares à 2 reprises et j'ai le plaisir de donner la parole à M. Périquet qui est le co-founder et le CIO de Tessares. Je continue en anglais puisqu'on m'a préparé le texte en anglais. Graduated civil engineer in electrical engineering at UCL in 96. Mr. Périquet has almost 20 years of experience in the telecom sector, from R&D engineer to senior management positions at Alcatel, Nokia, and NSN, and telco operators in Europe, Asia, and USA. Cher Monsieur Périquet, vous avez la parole.
Well, thank you, Pascal. My name is Denis Périquet. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Tessares. Tessares is a tech company based in Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium. I will really do the transition between the challenges that were described at the beginning by Katja and by Pascal, and then the technology described by Suresh. I will not use the word MPTCP anymore. Right? So I will try to make something which is really as high level as possible, and I will explain how this technology or this approach can really reduce the digital divide in EU rural areas. That's really the objective of my presentation. So I will describe the benefit for the end user, but also I will talk about real examples of deployment that we have done, which are visible, that you can visit in different countries in Europe if you want to see that this is working. So it's a proof point of that the technology works. So if I start, Nicolas, can you help me? If I start by, it's again the same graph as shown by Katja. Today, there are still more than 50% of people in rural area who do not have access to what is called NGA, Next Generation Access. That's the term used by the EU to say a minimum of 30 megabits per second, which is the speed which is seen as good enough to have a decent experience. So that's a huge number, and we see that the trend is positive. There are less people who are not covered by NGA, but still today there are more than 20 million households in Europe, in rural areas, which do not benefit from NGA, which means more than 50 million inhabitants. So that's the size of Spain, for instance. So it's a big problem. And when we look at the different countries, the disparity across the country is quite important. So the countries on the left-hand side are Malta, Belgium, Netherlands. So there, the people who do not benefit from the 30 megabits per second are limited, less than 10%. But then on the other extreme, like in countries like Finland, it's only 10% of the people in rural areas who have an NGA, a 30 megabit access. So it's a big challenge, and what can we do now to address that challenge? So that's what we do at Tessares. So if we also look to the footprint and how the technologies are used in rural areas, we see technologies like DSL have a very good footprint, above 80%. Technologies like LTE or 4G have also a very good footprint. But the more modern technologies like fiber or cable or VDSL, they have a coverage which is quite limited, and the increase of coverage is something like 6% for the VDSL or 3% for fiber. And if you look to the objective of the digital agenda by 2020, I mean, the rollout of those technology will not match those challenges. So while with hybrid internet, as it was clearly explained by Suresh, we are combining existing assets, existing networks. So we will combine DSL, which has a very good coverage, together with 4G, which also has a very good coverage. Which means by combining those two networks, which are widely deployed, we can bring people, I mean households, to the decent speed that we are hoping for everyone. So that's really what we do, and we really see that operators have a set of technologies that they are using to increase the internet experience. So they will continue to deploy fiber, no doubt, but they will probably deploy fiber in the first place in those highly dense areas, like the urban areas. They will also probably deploy other technologies called something like G.fast or VDSL plus and so on in suburban areas. But then for the rural areas, unfortunately, today it's only ADSL, and that's really where a hybrid comes into play. We will combine DSL and 4G to bring the people to the speed they need. What are the direct benefits of hybrid internet? So, first of all, the speed you get is higher. The speed you get is the sum of the bandwidth of the aggregated network. So if you have 10 Mbps on one network and you add another 20 from the other network, you get 30. It means you can get access to high definition video stream or even 4K, as it was explained in the video of Nokia. You can also have plenty of devices at home having a good internet experience. I mean, we expect that in the coming years there will be tens of devices per household, maybe 30, 40 devices per household. So that will support this. The other benefit is to have accessibility to the internet and what we also call the walk-out working. I mean, you can combine 4G and DSL, so you can imagine that first of all you are connected through 4G while you wait for the fixed line to be activated. So that's called the instant activation of the line. It's also about the reliability. We talk about internet being as vital as water or electricity. By combining two networks, you reduce the chance of being disconnected. More important, and that's why we say that we can address the digital divide today, it's all about reusing existing assets. So the deployment of such a project takes just a few months. So typically 6 months, that's how long we need to deploy this. And it's much shorter in contrast to the deployment of fiber that can take years to just activate a small number of households. So how does that work in practice? So just to give an example, so let's imagine that you're on a slow DSL line and the TV is off. Let's say you have maybe enough for a decent internet experience. You switch on TV, and as from that moment, most of the capacity of your DSL line is taken by the TV flow. And what is remaining is not enough for a good internet experience. So what hybrid internet will do, it will complement, it will add on top of what is still available on the line, additional capacity coming from the mobile network. And that's really the beauty of it. I mean, we start by using the existing capacity on the fixed line, which is usually cheaper, and then we complement that with extra capacity coming from the mobile network. So if we look now, I mean, I go back to that first slide and the disparity that we see in Europe. Actually, there are already quite a few operators in Europe who have deployed hybrid. I mean, we count something like 10 of them. And we see that there are operators like KPN in the Netherlands. We are on the left side, so already with a very good NGA coverage, they have deployed hybrid. And then on the other extreme, we also have Finland, who have also decided to deploy hybrid. So for us, the key point is that we believe that this approach could also be adopted by all the countries, all the operators in the countries between the two extremes. So just to illustrate what we do at Tessares, we're a small company based in Wallonia, but we already have 4 customers. We have Proximus here in Belgium. Proximus was also instrumental in, let's say, the definition and the design of our solution. Then we have KPN in the Netherlands, we have Telia in Lithuania and Telia in Finland. On top of that, there are some other countries in Europe, 3 other countries, also with ongoing pilot phases. And we have also 1 pilot phase in North America. What we can do with our solution, we can deploy that on a variety of routers that you have at your place. What is really, really interesting to see is that the number of users, end users, citizens who are benefiting from the solution is increasing really a lot. The inflection point that you see happened in September. So until September, what we were doing with our customers were large-scale field trials. So they were rolling this out with maybe 1 village or several villages. And since September, we really see an uptake, an adoption of the technologies by those 4 customers. So we are really, let's say, on a good track, and it has been proven that it works in the field. And now I will just, go into a bit more details of two of our customers, so KPN and in the Netherlands, and then Telia in Finland. So, so KPN in the Netherlands, that's the incumbent operator, as you know. They have roughly 3 million fixed customers, fixed broadband customers, and a percentage of them, between 8 and 10% of those of their customers, they are on a low-speed line. So that's really the target for hybrid internet access. What they will do, they will just reuse the box which is already deployed in the field, already adopted by their customers, and then they will add to it a small device that will connect to the 4G network. And our software is running on that small device. The way they do it, they don't charge for it, right? They just elevate the speed of those customers, but for free. Because they say, okay, we just want our customers to have a better internet experience. They send that box by mail, by the post, to the people, and then it's a self-install procedure. So it's very easy. And the feedback that we have from KPN and their customers is that they are extremely happy because their experience, the speed was really elevated overnight when they received the box. What we see now is that there is a big push from KPN with marketing campaigns to push that to their customers, and that's really increasing the adoption of that technology for those who are in need of additional. The second example that we have, and that's a more recent one that we have won this year and deployed within 6 months, that's Telia in Finland. So Finland is a special market because the consumption of data on mobile network is really high. It's an unlimited data plan, and their consumption is 5 times what we can see in our countries. It's also the incumbent operators, and they have launched different offerings. So you can subscribe to what they call a medium, a large, an extra large, or an XXL fixed subscription. Medium means 50 megabits per second, large 100 megabits per second. And if the fixed line does not deliver the speed that they want to sell, then they complement with additional capacity coming from the mobile network. Another reason for them to deploy hybrid is because they have premium content. It's the Ice Hockey League. Ice hockey is extremely important in Finland, and they wanted to distribute that content to more people also in the remote areas of Finland, and they are also using hybrid to do that. So they have launched mid of August. They have activated the first customer in September, and since then we have seen a steady growth of the number of active users. So if you go to their website, this is what you will see. If you want to subscribe to their fixed offering, it's medium, large, extra large, and XXL, and you enter your address. They can calculate the speed you get on your line. If there is not enough speed, then you are eligible to hybrid, and then you have access to 50 megabits or 100 megabits, which is the objective of the digital society. So today, the key message is that today we can address the digital divide by combining existing networks and having more happier customers. So in conclusion, I would say that there are really three benefits for the EU end users and the SMEs. Is one, today, more people in the rural areas, they can have access to the NGA, the 30 megabits that we're mentioning. Two, it's to shorten the time, right? I mean, the 2020 is in less than 14 months from now. We have this objective for the digital agenda. So what can we do to reach those objectives within the time frame that was set? And three, with the same technology, because our technology is agnostic, we can also meet the objective of the gigabit society by combining new technologies like VDSL and 5G. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup. La question que j'ai sur les informations qu'on vient de recevoir, je vais la poser par après. Une question très simple, mais très importante. The last but not least speaker in our round and the panel is Henderickx. He is Director Network Consulting, Engineering and PLM Technology in the EIN division at Nokia based in Belgium. He holds a bachelor's degree in Industrial Engineering, Data Communications and a master's degree in Economy and provides senior level consulting on advanced IP solutions for service provider and enterprise customers. He has over 20 years experience in the communication and networking industry and is a regular speaker at technical conferences all over the world. Meneer Henderickx, u heeft de floor.
Actually, we've talked a lot about MPTCP and focusing on what I call more the residential areas, right? On how they can improve the experience and the bandwidth towards the residential subscriber base. What we see is that there is also the same need in the enterprise market for similar, let's say, capabilities, right? And I think if you look to the general theme, what we are talking about here, it's all about trying to combine multiple access technologies to achieve higher throughput, more reliability, and actually better quality of experience to the end customers, right? So also if you look to the digital agenda, if you look a lot of our enterprise customers in different market segments, being retail, being energy and transport and stuff like that, they are having facilities which are actually also available in very rural areas. And again, those people also want to benefit on the additional abilities of different access technologies would be available to them, and they would also like to benefit from the different access technology to increase the bandwidth and also to increase speed, because what they see is that the consumption of their applications which are available are also driving more and more bandwidth. Video is actually growing across the board. There is more applications which are moving to cloud, right? So they need to be able to access the internet much more than their private environment. And we see that there is also a requirement in the enterprise space to actually leverage that additional capacity which will benefit those type of customers. So what we'll talk about here is technology called software-defined wide area network, right? So it's in the area of software-defined networking. I don't know whether people are familiar with that to a certain extent. But I try to give a bit of the analogy of what Suresh and Olivier has been explaining. It kind of gives, so in terms of what we are trying to achieve, it's very similar than what we are trying to achieve for the residential market. The difference, what you see in terms of the building blocks which you're having here is besides a device at the enterprise or at the home, if you will, or in this case at the enterprise office, which is combining those different access technologies, which is what we call as the one device, and that can be either a software package or can be a physical device, right? So it can be either a software entity or a physical device. Then we also introduce what we call a controller, right? So typically in the world of SDN, we try to centralize a little bit more, and what that does, it helps in the deployment, it helps in the availability, and it helps in the optimization type of environment, right? Now, so unlike MPTCP, right, which is actually using, let's say, a transparent connectivity so it doesn't create additional overhead, what we see in enterprise environment is that they have to deal with a lot of different protocols. So TCP is of course the majority of it, but we also have to deal with native Ethernet connectivity, so where there is no IP, right? Or that is UDP. So there is many different applications, and as such, what we see in the world of SD-WAN, we typically use what we call overlay or tunneling mechanisms, which allow for those different set of transport protocols to be used, right? Another key difference between the residential market and the enterprise market is that what we are kind of doing in this environment is we build what we call an overlay network, and I think the next slide is actually better. So we build like an overlay network over the existing internet, if you will, to create a private environment for the enterprise. Now, one of the key differences between, let's say, the residential market is you have to consume the internet. In this case, the different branches, let's say on the left-hand side, they want to communicate directly with each other. So what we call full mesh. So every site, for example, if you do a voice call, they want to actually communicate directly between the different sites. They don't want to go to a centralized element in the network and then come back, because that would not be very optimal in terms of latency. So if you do a voice call and if your latency is very high, your quality of experience, even though you can multipath the traffic, you also have to deal with latency in terms of your communication flow. So as such, the difference between an MPTCP, which is typically focusing on a single connection or a single path, we actually build what we call a fabric, right? And we build that fabric with this controller, which is basically the brain, right? And we build like an overlay type of environment on which those different applications are residing. And typically when you look into the enterprise, you have a mix of what type of applications are consumed. So we have SaaS, like Office 365, which I think is very familiar with people, like Skype and stuff like that, Skype for Business. So typically you consume that directly from the internet. But an enterprise also have environments which are in their private data centers. So even the EU type of environment, they don't want to expose everything to the public internet because it's unsecure. You have your private environments which you need to communicate to. And some of the enterprises, depending on the market segment, they even go to the public clouds like Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud and so on. And there is also initiatives in Europe and stuff like that. So what you see is that the amount of elements and flows or applications which enterprises are consumed are actually very diverse. And what we try to achieve with SD-WAN is we on one hand want to leverage the multi-pathing capabilities which we explained before, to leverage the extra capacity which we can get for the application consumption. But then we try to deal with the complexities of all those different applications which an enterprise are consuming. And you see that there is a very dynamic market, because you see those applications moving either to internet-based access, a private cloud environment, or a public cloud environment. And so what SD-WAN is trying to do is trying to combine multipathing, ease of deployment, getting quality of experience in a vast majority of type of application suites, right? And so one technology we could, and we are leveraging MPTCP for some of this, but what we also see is that we leverage other technologies as well. For example, if you want to use two, let's say, LTE connections, right? Because sometimes people say, I want reliability, I want to get LTE from one provider, and I want to have another LTE connection from another provider. We combine it, but you see that the internet is not always very reliable, right? So what we also do is we send sometimes the packets over both at the same time in the hope that one arrives, or even on 3 lines in the hope that one arrives. And you can do that for not so high bandwidth applications, right? So that works for like voice. For video it would not work. There MPTCP type of environments are better, or other type of technologies. So you see that what we are trying to do is have a central brain with SD-WAN, which is then trying to leverage multiple access, and it doesn't have to be limited to 1 or 2, it can be 3, sometimes people use 4, so it depends a bit on what we try to do, right? Or what people are trying to achieve. Now, as such, so what we are leveraging, so MPTCP as a protocol is a very nice protocol what Olivier developed, because it gives, within the protocol, it gives bandwidth consumption, it gets immediate feedback on how the communication is used. But it's, like I said, it's for voice, it doesn't work all the time, or for other applications. So what we are trying to do is, depending on the type of application, we are combining different methods on trying to achieve the best quality of experience in order to leverage the enterprise experience in the best possible way. Okay? As such, so here you get a bit of a view of what we try to do, because every enterprise has a different set of policies which are important for them. So for some people, they use Office 365 going to the internet. Some people are using SAP or ELM type of application, which are very important. So you see that people try to leverage different application profiles depending on their needs, and we try to leverage the best possible consumption of those applications over that fabric, which I try to explain. Okay? And as a result, what you see is that SD-WAN as a technology is not yet suited for a residential type of plane, because we also combine, so the fabric is typically consists of full encryption. So we do full IPsec encryption, because a lot of enterprises want to make sure that there is privacy involved and stuff like that. We try to work in what we call a full mesh type of environment in order to make sure that they have the best possible communication. And we try to leverage multiple type of use cases. So in enterprise, it's important that if you build a new facility and you don't have, let's say, a fixed line, you can use LTE. So it's a technology which allows you to start up very quickly. It is a technology which allows you to combine multiple access technology, can be multiple fixed line, multiple broadband connectivity, multiple wireless connectivities. And we try to ensure that all those applications, depending on how they are consumed, get the best quality of experience, no matter where they are residing, on the internet, in a private cloud, or in a public cloud. What I try to represent here on the right-hand slide is also, if you look to the adoption of SD-WAN as a technology, right, and we are one of the companies, the growth in that space is actually pretty high, right? But what is key for this meeting is that also it's important that we have that we focus not only on residential but also on enterprise type of use cases, because those people also require that additional capacity and could leverage multi-pathing type of technologies to increase their quality of experience.
Thank you very much. Perfect. We have 8 minutes left because we have to get out of the room at 3 o'clock because there's another meeting that will take place here. Last point in my agenda is Q&A. I would like to ask the first question to Monsieur Périquet, like announced. Is it today possible to purchase a Tessares box in Bullingen, Belgium, East Belgium, in order to increase the internet speed in my home?
Well, we sell to operators. We don't sell directly to the end user. So we have no control on who will benefit from the solution. So that's always the operators who will decide its own marketing strategy to bring that solution to the market.
But is it now? So I have to ask Proximus to do that. But would it be possible to do it? Because
yes, I mean, there are, I don't have the exact figures, but there are thousands and thousands of people in Belgium already active with the solution.
Perfect. I give the floor to those who have questions to one of the panelists. So the floor is yours. Feel free to ask the question in the language you want to. Frank.
Thank you very much for this lesson of Internet technology. My name is Hans Bogic. I am a colleague of Pascal here in the European Parliament. I'm from Slovenia. We're quite good in these things, not in connectivity. And this lesson was very important. In past, I was mayor in Slovenia in 1998 2011. And in 2007-2008, we had access to European money and for broadband connection. It was a big lesson for us what to do, how to do to learn this. And we were quite successful. We built fibers in municipality in which we have villages and we have very good connectivity. but really there are a lot of technical questions. As we see today, there are new possibilities, and what is very important, that I'm very glad that this is possible. I work here in European Parliament on this topic of smart villages, what you mentioned. And I think that it's really the main condition if we want to stop this trend in Europe that rural areas are less populated and that people move from rural poor areas to rich areas. When we speak about rural areas in Belgium, Netherlands, it's a little different than we saw Finland or other part of Eastern Europe. So I think that it's really very good advantage if we can combine this connectivity, and I'm very glad that I succeeded last year in this preparatory action that we will have, and we work hardly with European Rural Network, European Network for Rural Development and others, to spread this mindset in rural areas between people, and connectivity, broadband is number one. Then you can speak in precision farming, in platforms for connectivity between consumers, producers. Then you can speak about e-mobility, other things. So that, thanks for this lesson. I have no special question, but I think that these topics, this what you speak now, solve many problems and reduce the costs, investment costs, which are the main obstacle. Because usually, I say when we speak about smart cities, there are millions behind, and unfortunately, usually millions of dollars. But here we speak about people, and sometimes we need public investments to ensure this connectivity. But this is a solution which solve many problems, and that we can go in this direction. Thanks for this lesson, Pascal, and for this event.
Thank you for the comment. We should perhaps invite them to a committee session when we speak about smart villages, in order to spread that message more widely. There was another question. Yes?
Thomas Cooper from the European Commission. I have a short question to the hybrid solution. What would stop an OTT player to deploy it sort of on top of another network? Because that seems to be the problem, that if I understood Pascal correctly, there would probably be people waiting for such a solution to improve their broadband connection, but maybe it's not offered by an operator yet.
Well, we see, for instance, in France, OVH is offering this solution in an OTT fashion. So they have what they call the over-the-box, and they can combine networks from the different suppliers of broadband connectivity. So being France Telecom, Orange, or SFR, or Free. Right? When you combine fixed and mobile, if you don't own the assets, in particular the mobile network, it's a bit more complex to do this, because you have to pay for the mobile data being transported on the mobile network of someone else. So what we have seen is that the hybrid solution, DSL plus 4G, is usually deployed by someone who owns both assets, because it's all about using what is available in terms of capacity on the mobile network that you don't need for the smartphone. You just reuse that to boost the speed of the long DSL lines.
So it's a cost issue rather than a technical issue.
There is a business case issue. Yeah. But technically, when we demonstrate our solution, we take a fixed line somewhere, we take a SIM card from an operator, and we can demonstrate the solution anywhere. It's over the top, right? But when it comes to deploy it, yes, usually you need to own the assets.
Thank you. What was the name of the company deploying it in France?
OVH. They do that for SMEs. It's only for SMEs.
Thank you very much. Perhaps the last question, because it's 1 to 3.
Okay, Manuel Berger, Dutch Telecom, very short. 3 short remarks, 1 question. Maybe the question first, if I don't have time for the remarks. In 2025, what's your expectations of bandwidth over hybrid? Do you have an idea of how it will develop until then? That's my question. The remarks, it's a pity that this debate didn't take place 2.5 years ago, when we're starting the discussions on the electronic communications code, because all the conversations we had with your colleagues were fiber all the way, without thinking about other possibilities to deploy networks and how to provide technology to different regions, and in particular rural areas. And two final remarks. My CEO usually says the last 10%, to connect the last 10% in terms of population costs the same as the first 90. So these technologies are key to connect this final piece of population. And finally, be careful with the use of state aid. I know the money's there, but at least use it in the regions where it's needed. Be careful with black areas. Don't overbuild where good technology is already present. That's it.
Question two.
So from a technical viewpoint, there is no limit that the amount of bandwidth that we can do with hybrid. So in the lab, we've done TCP connection at 50 gigabits per second. So I don't see limit.
Yes?
Yeah, I think like Olivier said, the technology is, I think it depends on what type of CPE you have available, what type of CPU typically available to you to leverage the technology, but I don't think there's a speed limit necessarily. Usually the speed will be maybe coming from the access lines and how much you have. And potentially the CPE, if you want to reuse your installed base, depends on the CPU which you have available on your device in the home.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder about state aid and really focusing money on where it is actually needed. This is exactly what we're preaching in NTT Region. But let me still pick up and make a positive remark and a plea for fiber, or any kind of future-proof technology which is there. At the end of the day, all the Wi-Fi solutions will need to feed into this. And so the investment costs for deploying hybrid is, in my eyes, not so, for everything I understand, not so massive. That's a nice interim solution, and time is an issue, so if we can deliver that very, very fast, that's great. But to think 20, 30 years ahead, so far, personally, without being an expert on these technologies, I'm not aware of anything else that can really be that future-proof than fiber. So let's not forget that there is under the ground somehow always a need eventually to think of that. And if I would have a choice to focus money on something big where really the investment costs are an uphill struggle, I think I would still be in favor of that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A last question from my side, because I'm a member of the European Parliament. Is this issue at the same level as the States, or are we, as Europeans, a little bit further than them on that technical issue?
You mean hybrid in general?
Hybrid in general.
I believe, personally, my view, because I cover the worldwide, I see that Europe is further ahead than the other region in terms of hybrid. I think there is more focus in the European regions on hybrid than there is across the world. What you do see in other countries or other regions is combining Wi-Fi and LTE. So the use case which Olivier mentioned is how can I leverage experience across Wi-Fi and LTE more for mobile users? Because sometimes you switch over from Wi-Fi to LTE and you lose connectivity. But the real use of getting rural broadband to a higher level is more developed in Europe than it is in the rest of the world.
Beautiful conclusion. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the panelists for having done that. A beautiful exercise to explain internet and the hybrid internet in an easy way. Thank you for that. If there are questions from journalists to one of the panelists, we should do that outside because we have to get out of that room. Thank you very much.